The Orioles last week announced their 2023 minor league coaching staffs, and there are some very important names on that list when it comes to developing the future Orioles. So we'll break down each staff and the names you need to know coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast.
You are Locked On Orioles, your daily Baltimore Orioles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, Orioles fans. Today is Monday, February 13th, 2023, and welcome back into the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Connor Newcomb, and coming up on today's episode, we're going to take a look through the Orioles 2023 minor league coaching staffs. As late last week, all of those staff members were announced. We got some changes from last year, some people leaving the organization, coming into the organization as well. And we're going to break down all the names you need to know, from the new guys to the people that have been there for a while, to the people that really make a difference in this Orioles player development machine that they have built over the last 4 years. But that's all coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast. Before we get there, though, just did want to thank you for making Locked On Orioles your first podcast listen of the day. We're free and available on all podcast listening platforms. And listen, we are so close to spring training, just 2 days away from pitchers and catchers reporting. And it's a big week here on the Locked On Orioles podcast as we return this week to 5 episodes per week. So you can expect an episode every morning, Monday through Friday this week, all the way through the end of the 2023 season, covering all things Orioles. So make sure to subscribe wherever you listen, on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Leave a 5-star rating and review if you'd like. And make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to the Locked On Orioles podcast on YouTube. All our episodes every week up on the YouTube page as well. We are very close to 2,000 subscribers. Going to do some cool Orioles giveaways when we get to 2,000, but you have to be subscribed on YouTube to be entered to win. So make sure to subscribe. But let's jump right into it here. Back to 5 days a week. And we start on a Monday, 2 days out from Major League Spring Training. Talking about a little bit minor league baseball. We did that on Friday, breaking down what the outlook for the 2023 season is for the Orioles' top 15 prospects. And today we're going to talk about some people who really have a big hand in what that outlook looks like. The minor league coaching staffs for the Baltimore Orioles. Because since Mike Elias has come in and brought in a lot of his people, the O's have built a player development machine, and they continue to churn out talent, making people better and better. And a lot of that has to do with these minor league staffs. So as they were announced, just wanted to run through some of these names, talk a bit about them, the people you need to know as this Orioles team and franchise kind of turns from a rebuild to a competing team. But that doesn't mean things change with how well they've been going at the minor league level. So let's start with the AAA Norfolk Tides, obviously one step away from the big leagues. And the name you need to know on this staff is, of course, Buck Britton, going into his second year as Norfolk Tides manager. Of course, the older brother of former Orioles pitcher Zach Britton. And Buck, he played in the O's system as well. Was a 35th round pick of the Orioles back in 2008. And he played 7 seasons in the Orioles system from 2008 to 2014. Never got to the big leagues, bounced around a little bit later, did get to AAA in the minors, but never got to the bigs, retired after 2016. And the Orioles immediately hired him as a coach. He was on the Shorebird staff in 2017, managed them in 2018. Then he managed the Bowie Baysox from 2019 through 2021 and was promoted to Norfolk manager last season. And really the thing that always comes up with Buck Britton, and I think less so this offseason because of how much success the Orioles had under Brandon Hyde in 2022. But the big question continues to be, could Buck Britton be the next Orioles manager? If the O's ever want to move on from Brandon Hyde over the next couple of years, would Buck Britton be ready? I think the O's would want to get him at least another year or two of AAA managing experience before that happens. But he's going to be a quick riser in the coaching game, and another team could come and poach him onto a major league staff. So definitely something to look out for, that even if it's not the manager pretty soon, he could be on the O's major league staff at some point in the near future. The new face you need to know on this staff is Brink Ambler. Now, he is not a new face to the Orioles system, but he is a new face to Norfolk as he takes over as the Tides hitting coach for the 2023 season. Ambler was the Delmarva Shorebirds hitting coach in 2022, was hired before the 2021 season, where he spent the year as the minor league technology coordinator in Delmarva this year, was a volunteer assistant at William & Mary before that. He played baseball at Alabama as a walk-on, a really interesting hitting mind, and gets the jump from low A to triple A just a year after being a technology coordinator. The O's see a lot in him. Of course, Tim Gibbons, who had been the AAA hitting coach for years, did move on to a new job outside the organization, but the O's welcome in Brink Ambler. Other than that, on the staff, it stayed the same from last year. Justin Ramsey continues to be the Tide's pitching coach. It'll be his second season. O's brought him in 2019. He's coached at Delmarva, Bowie, and Norfolk now. Ramon Sambo, 17th season with the Orioles organization. He's been in Norfolk since 2019. He will be the fundamentals coach once again this season. And Joshua Rodriguez will be the development coach. It'll be his second season with the Orioles after coming over from the Rays. Both have been spent in AAA. Down to AA Bowie we go, and Kyle Moore is back in his second season as the Bowie Baysox manager. Moore, who has been in the Orioles system for a while as both a player and a coach. This will be his second year managing the Baysox. He managed the Ironbirds in 2021, managed the Shorebirds in 2019, and the Ironbirds when they were a short season affiliate in 2018, was also an assistant coach for the Shorebirds, the Baysox, the Frederick Keys from 2013 to 2017, and actually played in the Orioles system for 2 years, 2010 and 2011, after they signed him as an undrafted free agent out of Alabama. All in all, this will be Moore's 14th season in the Orioles organization as a player and a coach. He's one of the big staples in this org, and he will manage this team. The new face you need to know is Sherman Johnson, who takes over as the hitting coach here for the Bowie Baysox. His first season as a coach at any level. The Orioles hire him to be the AA Bowie hitting coach. He was a 14th round pick of the Angels in 2012 out of Florida State, a left-handed hitter who played multiple infield positions in his professional career. Did get a cup of coffee in the big leagues with the Angels in 2018, played in 10 games with Anaheim, did not record a hit, never got his first big league hit. But from 2013 to 2021, played in the Angels, Reds, and Twins system, had a 744 career minor league OPS. And then he did play indie ball last year. In 2022, he was in independent ball with the Kane County Cougars and had an 801 OPS in 90 games before calling it quits, retiring, and then getting hired by the Orioles. Now, he does replace Brandon Becker, who was the hitting coach in Bowie last year and was really a renowned guy, played in the O system, then was hired as a coach. He was not listed when the Orioles put out their press release for the minor league coaches, and I didn't see anything about Becker accepting a new job, so unsure where Brandon Becker is at now, but Sherman Johnson does take over as Bowie hitting coach. There's also a new pitching coach in Bowie. That is Forrest Herman, who gets the upgrade from being the Ironbirds pitching coach in 2022. Josh Conway, of course, was the pitching coach here in 2022. Did not see Conway on this list either, so he may have left the organization as well. But Forrest Herman, who was hired by the O's before last season to be the pitching coach in Aberdeen, man, he got a lot of praise from people inside the organization, outside the organization. Big drive line guy. A lot of people like Forrest Herman. He seems to be a fast riser in this Orioles system. He had been a pitching coach and a coach in the Red system and the Mariners system before this, worked at Premier Pitching Performance, one of those, pitching labs back from 2016 to 2018. But Herman, good to see him get this promotion. The name you need to know elsewhere on this staff is Tim DeJean, who will go into his second season as the fundamentals coach for the Bowie Baysox, and also got another promotion. He's been named the Orioles minor league infield coordinator as well. So Tim DeJean will do kind of some roving and will work with all the teams, although he'll specifically mostly be in Bowie. He was the fundamentals coach for the Ironbirds in 2021. The Orioles hired him in 2019 in the GCL as a development coach, but he's been around multiple stops, was coaching high school and college for 12 years before the Orioles hired him. And the players seem to love Tim DeJean, and he gets kind of a new role as well in 2023. And then the development coach in Bowie is Ryan Gohl, who moves up from that role in Aberdeen, where he had that job for the last 2 years, was hired by the Orioles as an intern in player development in 2020 and has now been a coach for the last 3 seasons. He was actually a student manager and a bullpen catcher at Minnesota. Actually did not, play on the D1 team in college, but was a big part and continues to move up this Orioles system. He flipped spots with Billy Facto, who was the development coach in Bowie last year, but Facto is now with the Ironbirds. And speaking of the Ironbirds, we're going to get to them up next, talk about the Aberdeen coaching staff with a couple of new faces, especially at pitching coach. And then we'll talk Delmarva as well. They made a few changes, but really keeping together an important staff that helped the Shorebirds in 2022. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. The midway point of the NBA season is here, and it's now the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. So just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. And then you can bet on everything from the money line to point scores and threes drained. Now, look, I go on the FanDuel app. Yeah, there's no football anymore with the Super Bowl finishing up on Sunday, but there's still plenty of basketball. And specifically, you're looking at the NBA bets. And, one thing you could look at moving forward, I'm just taking every player prop over on Nikola Jokic for points, rebounds, and assists. He's seeming to have a triple-double every single night. So take the over on Jokic and the Nuggets. And plus, FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with a same-game parlay. So don't miss the chance to get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. So we're running through these names on the Orioles minor league coaching staffs announced last week, all the staffs for the 2023 season. As we move on now to the Aberdeen Ironbirds, the Orioles High A affiliate, and their manager for the second straight year is Roberto Mercado. Roberto Mercado is the manager once again this year, hired by the Orioles last year. It'll be his second season in Aberdeen. Kind of an interesting path he took to get to Baltimore. Had spent the previous 11 seasons as the head varsity baseball coach at New Britton High School in Connecticut. He was an assistant at that school for the 7 seasons before that. So had been at New Britton since 2004 as a coach, where he was also the dean of students. He was also coaching in the Cape Cod League for a while, coaching with Team USA, had played at New Britton as well, played a little college ball. He was coaching youth baseball. He was just kind of a local, well-known coach. And the Orioles kind of found him. And all of a sudden, he's in his second year as the manager in Aberdeen. The hitting coach returning is Zach Cole for his second season with the Ironbirds. The O's hired him as a technology coordinator in 2021, now been the hitting coach for the last 2 seasons. Really an interesting hitting mind at the Aberdeen level as well. And the pitching coach for the Aberdeen Ironbirds is Austin Meine. He is the new face on this Aberdeen staff, hired by the Orioles this season after he was a pitching coach at Charlotte from 2021 to 2022 at the college ranks. Also before that served as the director of pitching and biomechanics at Premier Pitching Performance, a spot in St. Louis, Missouri, where pitchers go to train. Multiple Orioles pitchers have been there in the past. Austin played in college at Lindenwood at St. Louis Community College as a pitcher, and a guy who has really helped out a lot of different pitchers across baseball at P3, and now joins the Orioles for his first job in Major League Baseball, or at least in minor league baseball with the Ironbirds. Chase Sebi is back with the O's this season in Aberdeen as the fundamentals coach. He gets moved up from being the development coach for the FCL Orioles in 2022. The Orioles hired Sebi last season right out of college. He was a 4-year catcher at Ball State, was the MAC Defensive Player of the Year in 2019, got a degree in actuarial science, and the Orioles hire him to coach fundamentals. He now moves up to Aberdeen. And they also added to this staff Billy Facto, who I mentioned before. He was the development coach in Bowie last year. Facto, now the development coach in Aberdeen this season. O's hired him in 2021 as a technology coordinator intern. He played baseball at Lynn University from 2017 to 21, also got his MBA from there as well. And now, again, a coach in the Orioles system. Moving on to low A Delmarva, where Felipe Alou Jr. is the name you need to know. He is back for his second season as the Delmarva Shorebirds manager. 2022 was his managerial debut, despite this being now his 17th season for Alou working in the Orioles organization. Previously, of course, was the director of the Orioles Dominican Republic Academy, did so much work down there for the Orioles. And now, basically, the O's decided last year to bring Alou stateside to Delmarva because they knew that Delmarva team last year, and it's going to be kind of the similar thing in 2023, had so many young, sometimes teenage Latin ball players who, only spoke Spanish. And Felipe Alou was a huge part of A, they already knew him from the Dominican Academy, a lot of them did, and B, helping to assimilate a lot of these players to minor league baseball, to living in the U.S., to playing in a place like Delmarva. He was a huge help for the Shorebirds last season, and he stays in that role. Of course, he's also the son of former MLB manager Felipe Alou, brother of Luis Rojas and Moises Alou, part of the baseball royalty family that is the Alous. He did play in the minors with the Royals in the 90s. Felipe never did get to the major leagues, but has been a huge, huge part of the Orioles minor leagues. Moving up to hitting coach with Delmarva is Josh Bunselmeyer, who has been in the O system for a couple years now. He was hired in 2021 as a hitting coach in the Dominican Summer League, then was the hitting coach in the FCL last year. Now the hitting coach in Delmarva. Bunselmeyer kind of making his way step by step up the ranks, played some indie ball, played in college at St. Louis, and now helping with hitting in the O's system. The new face to know on this staff is Adam Blade, who gets a promotion as well. He was the pitching coach in the FCL for the last 2 seasons. Blade now named the pitching coach for the Shorebirds in 2023, replacing Joe Haumacher, who is no longer with the organization. Blade was a development coach in Frederick in 2019 after the Orioles hired him. And Adam Blade actually got drafted. He was a 27th round pick of the Astros in 2017 out of Penn after he had transferred from Virginia. Pitched 2 years in the Astros system, but never got past high A. But he did know Chris Holt from pitching in the Astros system. Of course, Mike Elias knew him as well. And Holt called him up and offered him the job in 2019, and now he has made his way up to Delmarva. Blade also related to new Oakland Athletics outfielder J.J. Blade, who was the number 4 pick of the 2020 draft by the Miami Marlins. And Blade, of course, was just traded the other day to the Athletics in exchange for A.J. Puck, and his brother also getting a promotion to the Delmarva Shorebirds. Another name to know is Daniel Fajardo, who is the fundamentals coach for the second straight season with the Shorebirds. Fajardo, who was a coach in the Dominican Summer League with the O's in 2021, has been with the Orioles for a long, long time. They signed Fajardo as an international free agent out of Venezuela and played in the O's minor league system from 2012 to 2020, played over 350 games in the Orioles system, mostly in the low minor leagues, and last played for the Shorebirds in 2019. And then they just kind of immediately hired him as a coach, and he has been huge for this Delmarva staff. And then also returning as well is Colin Murray as the development coach for the second straight season with Delmarva after he was working with the Tigers in 2021. The Orioles hired him. He's had a lot of different jobs throughout baseball, kind of working his way up from a sales executive to a minor league video manager to a pitching coordinator. He was a grad assistant at Georgia Southern, then got a baseball information job with the Tigers, and now is in the dugout with the Orioles for the second straight season. But we do have to get to rookie ball as well, because really when you look at it, a lot of the development does happen at the FCL and Dominican Summer League levels. We'll talk about those staffs and a little bit about the other kind of rovers and big picture coaches coming up next to finish off the pod. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is also brought to you by Built Bar. If you're looking for a delicious treat, but you don't want all the fat and the calories, well, you got to try a Built Bar because we just got through the holidays. It's the new year. Many of you have some New Year's resolutions, and for some, Built Bar can make it easier because Built Bar is healthy but it's actually tasty. This is the thing. I feel like it's really the only good tasting protein bar out there. And it's not even good tasting. It's great tasting. These bars, they taste like candy bars. They're all covered in 100% real chocolate. They come in unbelievable flavors like peanut butter brownie and coconut almond. And I don't know how they do it because they're still healthy. Only 130 calories and 4 grams of sugar in each bar with a whopping 17 grams of protein. And now you don't have to wait to get your Built bars. In the past, you had to go order on Built.com, wait for them to come in the mail. You can still do that. But now Built bars are available in store at Walmart and Sam's Club. So you can drive out right now. Right now. You might be in the car listening to this podcast. Just head to Walmart or Sam's Club right now. Pick up some delicious and nutritious Built bars. So to finish up, taking a look at the Orioles coaching staffs in the minor leagues for 2023, we move on to the rookie ball levels into the Gulf Coast League, or the former Gulf Coast League, now the Florida Complex League Orioles. And Christian Frias moves into his second season as the FCL Orioles manager. Now, one change at the FCL this year, the Orioles have had 2 teams in the FCL for a couple of years, just one FCL team in 2023, and Frias will be the manager. He was hired by the Orioles in 2019 as a fundamentals coach after he had coached at Rio Grande and Wabash at the college level, had played a little bit in the Blue Jays system back in 2010 to 2012, and now managing once again with the FCL Orioles. Despite only having one team, they will have 2 hitting coaches and 2 pitching coaches. And one of the hitting coaches is Jalen Ferguson, who's in his second straight season with the FCL Orioles. Of course, has been in the O system for a while. They took him in the 9th round out of high school in Texas in 2015 and played in the O system as an outfielder until 2021. Played over 250 games in the Orioles system, and Ferguson now a coach as well. And then getting the call up is Christian Poulsen to be the other hitting coach. He was a hitting coach in the Dominican Summer League for the Orioles in 2022. Before that was a biomechanical hitting analyst at Elite Baseball Training for 3 years. Also worked with the Blue Jays as an intern and played at Maryville College, where he hit .362 in his career. Poulsen is now up with the FCL Orioles. The 2 pitching coaches, the first is Andy Sadowski, who comes back for a second season in the FCL after spending the previous 2 seasons as a pitching coach in the Dominican Summer League with the Orioles, had worked as a player development coach. The Orioles hired him in 2017 to be a TrackMan operator, and he is all the way up to an on-field pitching coach. Kind of a cool story for him. Had also worked with the Tigers and the Mariners systems before that. And then the new face to know is Jordy Henry, who will also be a pitching coach hired by the Orioles this season. And they didn't have to look far to get Henry. He was the director of prime pitching performance right here in Baltimore, working independently with pitchers. Now he's going to work with the Orioles and head down to Sarasota. Pitched at Wayland Baptist University in Texas for his college ball. And as a coach who's worked with a lot of players here in this area, he will now head down to Florida to work with the Orioles minor leaguers. And another name to know as we go to fundamentals coach is Troy Marrow, actually a former podcast guest right here on the Locked On Orioles podcast. We had him on last offseason before the Orioles hired him. He'll now be in his second season as an FCL Orioles fundamentals coach. A Baltimore native, played high school at Loyola Blakefield. He worked at a high school in Baltimore as an athletic director, had worked with the Giants previously, also coached at George Washington and NC Central, played at North Carolina Central as well. Just a really cool baseball mind. He's done a lot of cool work in his career. Again, you can go back to last offseason and listen to that episode with Troy Marrow, but he is back in the organization. And the other fundamentals coach returning is Colin Woody for his 3rd season as the Orioles FCL fundamentals coach. He was actually an Orioles 38th round pick in 2016 out of UNC Greensboro, played 3 years in the O system as a player, and then they hired him as a coach. 2 more coaches on this FCL Orioles staff. One is Isaiah Page, who will move into a new role this year as the pitching development coach for the FCL Orioles. He was the Ironbirds fundamentals coach in 2022 after the Orioles hired him, was a pitcher at Michigan, pitched for the Wolverines for 4 years, had a career 3.10 ERA in the Big Ten. He originally took a job with Fisher Investments after graduation, then was a pitching coach at Dallas College for the fall, and then the Orioles came calling, and he took that job and will now be in Sarasota. And moving on to kind of an on-field role this year will also be Tegan Leader, who will be a development coach for the FCL Orioles. This will be his 5th season with the O's, but his first season he's been staffed to coach as a team, had been a technology coordinator for the O's for the last few seasons. And then moving on to the Dominican Summer League Orioles, where the O's will still have 2 teams down in the Dominican. And the first name to know is Elvis Morel, who has been the Orioles DSL manager since 2010. Everybody knows him in that system. And then Chris Madero will also continue to manage. This will be his 3rd season as a manager for the Orioles Dominican Summer League teams. Did play in the minor leagues with the Orioles for a bit as well. The 2 hitting coaches, one is Julian Gonzalez. It'll be his 2nd season as a hitting coach with the DSL O's. And Jake Ratz is the new name to know on this staff, was hired by the Orioles this season to be a hitting coach. Spent the last 2 seasons as an assistant coach at Upper Iowa University, a Division II school. Had also coached at Butler, coached at some JUCOs after he played at South Dakota State. So an interesting name coming in. The pitching coach will be Deani Pasquale, who has been the DSL pitching coach since 2010, played in rookie ball with the Orioles in the early 2000s. And then 2 fundamentals coaches for this group. One is Ramon Lubo in his 3rd season with the DSL Orioles as a development coach. And then the other fundamentals coach is Miguel Habalera, who has been with the Dominican Summer League Orioles since 2010. He's been the manager. He's been coaching fundamentals. He's been doing other things, and he is back with the organization. But that's what those lower level coaches look like. Also some movement around in some other roles in the system. Of course, Matt Blood is back in his 4th season as the director of player development. But a couple names that you might know moving around. Mitch Plasmeyer is back as the minor league pitching coordinator for the Orioles. Justin Ramsey will return to his role as the upper level pitching coordinator, also will be Norfolk's pitching coach. Matt Packer making a switch. He was managing one of the FCL Orioles teams last year. He will now be the complex coordinator of instruction, so he will stay in Sarasota the whole year, but will be in a different role. Anthony Villa, who was most recently the lower level hitting coordinator, is now the hitting coordinator in the minor leagues as well, and a couple other promotions made in the Orioles system. But a lot of good people working in this system, working in this player development machine to try and create the next great Orioles big leaguers at the next level. But that's a look at those minor league coaches for the Orioles in 2023. Also, just interesting to kind of know those names, because these guys will help develop these players. And hey, you never know, similar to what happened with, Ryan Fuller a couple years ago. He was a fast rising name in the O system as a hitting coach. All of a sudden, he's the co-hitting coach at the major league level. I talked about that could happen for Buck Britton in the next couple of years. Wouldn't be surprised to see a guy like Justin Ramsey get some sort of major league job as well. But these guys continue to move up the ranks. Listen, you look at the O's coaching staff right now. I mentioned Ryan Fuller, Chris Holt was a minor league coach as well when he first came over and is now on the major league staff. So names it's good to know early, because they are doing a lot, and a lot of them behind the scenes without a whole lot of credit in helping develop these Orioles players. But that'll do it for the pod today. But don't worry, as I mentioned, we are back to 5 days a week here on the podcast. So we'll be right back with you tomorrow here on the pod. And unless there is any breaking news from the O's, any trades or signings or anything like that, I'm going to take a look at the World Baseball Classic rosters that were announced last week. Some, I would say, less Orioles than we expected, which was a little surprising. But we'll talk about the O's who are playing in the WBC. We'll talk about the schedule, what you can look forward to from that event, and also some former Orioles who are littered throughout the 2023 World Baseball Classic. But that's coming up on tomorrow's episode. Until then, I'm Connor Newcomb, and this has been the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.